The World Chess Championship 2018 has started. First game between challenger Fabiano Caruana and reigning world champion Magnus Carlsen, and we will take a look at it in this video. Caruana started with the white pieces, and the first game is always of special significance because you'll see how the players are in shape and also which openings they have prepared for so long for this specific match. So let's get into it. Caruana started with the white pieces and played main move e4. And the first surprise, already on the first move, Carlsen replies with the Sicilian defense and not his typical move, which is e7, e5. Knight f3, knight c6, and now Caruana goes for the Rossolimo variation with bishop b5 and not for the open Sicilian with d4. So it's not quite clear which variation Carlsen prepared in the open Sicilian. Maybe we'll find out later in the match. Bishop b5, g6, bishop takes c6. This is one of the ideas here of the Rossolimo, to take on c6 early on, give up the bishop and damage the black pawn structure here on c5. On the c file, give him double pawns. Now d3, bishop g7, h3, taking away the g4 square, knight f6, knight c3, knight to d7, preparing to play e5 and bring the knight to better squares, bishop e3, e5, taking more control over the center. Now castle. Castle is a slightly rare move in this position. The absolute main move is queen to d2 to exchange the dark squared bishops via h6, and typically black goes h6 to prevent that and then keeps maneuvering with moves like b6, queen e7, knight to f8, and black can play slowly here because the position is closed and there's no easy way for white to open up the position against the black king. So this is one possibility, but castle of course is also a logical move. And now b6 was played to protect the pawn c5 and prepare the maneuver knight f8, potentially knight to e6, knight h2. Knight h2 with the aim to now open up the position with f4. And in general, this makes a lot of sense because if your opponent's king is still in the center and you have a lead in development, which is the case for white here, we see white's pieces are all developed, he has castled already, then you should open the position. But in this specific case, the opening of the f-file actually does not achieve too much. After e takes f4, Caruana took with the rook. Maybe bishop takes f4 is a better option to have the bishop on this diagonal where it's better placed than on e3. But once again, the black position is fairly solid. For example, like this, knight to d4. And white has to mix it up. Here he could play a move such as e5 to bring the knight to e4. I think bishop takes f4 is more promising than taking with the rook. But those are details and it's really difficult to say. After rook takes f4, the point I'm trying to make here is that after bishop e6, yes, the f-file is half open for white, but he cannot really use it because the bishop is defending this pawn on f7, and in general, black is controlling a lot of key squares. There's no way for white to further open up the position against the black king in the center. So it's not a big problem for black that he's in behind in development. In fact, already here, I would rather prefer the black position because the black pieces are well placed and it's not clear how white will develop his play. Now queen d2 was played. This makes sense. g5. h6 and g5 were nice moves by Carlsen to take away more squares and also indicate his ambitions on the king side. Maybe later on he will open up the king side by pushing these pawns forward. And it's sending a clear message. Carlsen wants to go for the win with the black pieces in the very first game. Rook a1 makes sense to bring the rook into a game, but as I said, the bishop is defending the pawn and there's no threat here. So black keeps developing, goes queen to d6. And now this is the first moment, I think, where Caruana goes wrong. And it's very subtle, but I think here the next moves, Caruana is losing a little bit the threat. He goes knight g4 now. This makes sense to bring knight to f6, but we'll see the knight will end up on h5 in a few moves. And it's not clear to me that the knight is so well placed on h5. Actually, I would say that it was better to just bring the knight back to f3. So now play a move like a4, try to open up the position here on the king side. If black goes a5, then white can go queen e2 and prepare a push such as e5 in the future, open up the square e4 for the knight, and white is doing okay. Position is roughly balanced, still a very difficult position to play for both sides. After knight g4, black castles, and now white went knight f6. Here there was an interesting option with e5, but it is really not a move you would expect a human to play because it assumes some deep calculation here. After bishop takes e5, there's a follow-up with b4, and really white is sacrificing some pawns to open up the position and get some play of his own. Black can take the pawn, but probably should rather go c4. And now knight takes e5, queen takes e5, d4, queen to d6. And white can initiate some play here. This is much more active and much more promising for white than what we'll see in the game where black has everything firmly under control. So let's see the game. Knight f6 was played. The knight looks nice here on f6, but it's not doing too much, and black actually just plays knight d7, threatening to exchange it, and the knight goes to h5, but now bishop e5. And this is what I meant. White just played 3 moves with the knight g4, knight f6, knight h5, to end up on h5 and allow the bishop on the perfect square here, e5, where it's dominating the knight and also aiming against the white king here on g1. So the bishop is very well placed and the knight on h5 not so much. So this is why I criticized this maneuver. Black's actually threatening to push g4 and open some files, so Caruana played g4 himself. Now f6, b3, bishop to f7. Now there's the threat of taking on h5, taking on c3, playing queen to g3 check. Just to illustrate it real quick, a4, let's say, would be a mistake because black makes some exchanges and then brings in the queen and wins the piece. This is why Caruana retreated with the knight to d1. And here we had the first critical moment in the game. Carlsen decided to sacrifice a pawn with knight to f8. Very interesting decision. He could play it slow for a move like rook hg8 to stop any knight g7, knight f5 business, and then go on king b7 and play very slowly, and he's definitely better. The question will be, can he break through or not? But he decided to take it right away, to go for it with knight f8, and this gives away the pawn on f6. Now knight e6, this was the whole idea. The knight wants to go to f4 where it's very well placed, and Caruana played knight h5 back. Here he had a really good move available, also really beautiful move, that is knight to d7, making use of the fact that the bishop on f7 is undefended and the rook is attacking it. So rook takes d7, rook takes f7 would be a good trade for white. White would be okay here. So bishop f4 should be played, but now the knight can just go back, and actually the f4 square is blocked by black's own bishop, and it seems that white is pretty much okay here. But of course, a tough move to play, and knight h5 is the human way to treat this position. Now bishop takes, pawn takes, and finally the knight landed on f4, and it cannot be tolerated there because it's just too strong, too close to the white king, threatening to take on h3 as well. So white took, g takes f4, and now the g file opened up against the white king, and Caruana played the human move rook to g2, which is a decent move, but there was a better one, a quite surprising choice to sacrifice the exchange, and this indeed leads to an equal position, but it is very surprising because you would not think that this endgame at first sight is equal, but white is active enough with his king and knight that he can do that. And this is just a sample variation here. White becomes very active and is okay, but honestly, I would also rather be black here, and I don't think I would have gone for this endgame. This was also the impression by the commentators, by the way. Very surprising, but the computer makes it work. Rook to g2, rook hg8, now queen e2, preparing rook to g4, which is why now black takes on g2, plays queen to e6, threatening to win the queen, by pinning it on the g file, and white plays knight f2 to play the knight in between on g4. Now Carlsen plays a good move, goes queen to e8, attacking the pawn h5, which cannot be defended, and black is winning a pawn. In the meantime, white is trying to reorganize and get out of the g file, out of the pin here, and Caruana played king to f2. A good move, just to show you how dangerous the position already is. So if white went king h2, also a very logical move, right? Then black can go queen h4, rook g1, bishop to d4, rook g2, and now h5. This was the point. Now the knight cannot stay on g4. White can play knight to e3, but here black has a tactical shot available. What is that move? If you want to stop the video right now, he can go rook to g3. Rook takes g2 would not amount to anything. White can take back with the knight, but rook g3 is a good move, and here black's threatening the queen and the pawn. So white has to take, but in the end game, black wins this piece. This is not the end of it because white wins the pawn on h5, but this endgame is very promising, if not winning, for black. So this shows you already how dangerous the white position is, because the king is rather unsafe and black still has enough attacking potential to really cause some trouble. King f2. Bishop c7, a good move. The white was threatening to exchange the bishop, and this was a critical moment. But Caruana did not have much time here. He had spent a lot of time already to defend the position beforehand, and here he only took 23 seconds to play a losing move. He played king to e2, after which his position becomes lost. Absolutely necessary was the move e5 to create some counterplays, threatening to take on c6, so black should go king b7, and now knight f6. Now that the knight is defended, this move is possible. Beforehand, black could have picked up the knight with queen h4 check, but now this position is still defendable for white. Rook g3, let's say, queen takes f4. Now the queen trade would lead to a rook endgame, which should be just a draw here. Black's up a pawn, but his king is on the last rank, and white's rook is active enough, can get behind the pawn. That should be a draw. Should probably try in this position. Queen takes h3, but still, this is clearly the best white could have gotten, and here the position remains not so easy for white to play, but it is within the realm of equality. After king e2, it is not. Here black is pretty much winning. You can also see the bar going down in black's favor on the left side. Queen g5, a good move, preparing to play h5, and Caruana retreated with knight h2. And this was a curious moment, because here black has an obvious and very strong move, which is queen to e5. But Carlsen did not play this move. He played h5. Queen e5 is very strong because, for one, black's preparing to enter with the rook on g3 and also invade on the queen side. And this is the problem for white, that black can come from both sides, because on both sides of the board the position of white is weakened, and queen b2 is just a very unpleasant move to face, especially if you're low on time, as Caruana was at this moment. So when I was watching the game here, I thought that the game would not even last until the time control. We have now the 34th move, and Caruana still had to make 6 moves with very little time on the clock. So let's just see some sample variations here. White could go queen f2, now the queen comes in, king to d1, and maybe Carlsen did not see a way to continue from here, but already this looks so promising. And one very strong way to play, well, rook g3 is also good, but b5, I like this a lot, to bring the bishop into a game via a5 or b6, and white is just passive, defending, and cannot keep everything together. If white takes the pawn on c5, black just goes king b7, rook g2 coming, bishop b6, bishop a5, you name it. So this is game over. And also after other moves like queen d2, black can play a tactic here with bishop a5, bring in the bishop with tempo. There's no defense. Queen takes a5, of course, is refuted here. The queen and rook will checkmate the white king. So it is not clear why Carlsen did not go for queen e5, but he played h5. After this move, he also keeps a large range, a large advantage, but well, queen e5 was just obvious and much stronger. Rook to f2, quickly played by Caruana. Queen to g1, knight f1. And this was another important moment. Here, Carlsen took 7 minutes and he played h4, which is a big mistake because it gives his winning advantage out of his hands. What should he have done instead? Well, just a calm move here, king b7, stopping any e5 action because the pawn c6 is defended. And white is really passive. What can white do here? He is really passive. Black can slowly improve the position, maybe open it up with b5 and c4. There are many ideas here, so this was much stronger. And after h4, Caruana misses his chance. He had the chance to get back into the game with e5, but he played king to d2 instead after 1.5 minutes. e5 is a strong move. It threatens to take on c6 as well as on f4. And Black's best chance is to go rook g5. Now it can go king to d2, or what I personally like better, knight to d2 to bring the knight to a strong outpost on e4 where it's blocking the e-file. And after queen c1, white can save himself to this endgame where I believe he has excellent drawing chances. So this obviously is a dream come true compared to what we saw earlier where Black was attacking from all sides. But this dream did not come true here. White played king to d2 and Black is once again winning. King to b7, Carlsen realized probably that e5 was a threat and quickly played this move to take e5 out of the equation. Now c3. And here Carlsen played bishop e5, a good move, but really just crushing was rook g3, a very strong exchange sacrifice as Black gets protected past pawns here on g3 and f4. And the queen will just cause havoc here on the queen side. Rook to g2, queen to b1, Black's collecting these pawns. White has no counterplay and there's just no hope for white. After rook e2, white is still dreaming about counterplay with the e-pawn, and even this would be winning after queen e1, e5, but bishop e5 just takes this hope away. Black has time here to play queen a1 next. And what is white doing? Really, there's no way to keep this together. Just to point out real quick, rook f1, stop queen a1 would allow queen h2 followed by g2, g1, queen, and Black wins. So this was very strong and pretty much, you could say, almost directly winning. Bishop e5, king to c2, good move by Caruana. Caruana is doing his best to defend. Now Carlsen plays queen g7, that's fine, but the queen was well placed here because it's really not allowing white to get out. It's really tying down the white pieces, and better was to play b5, to play b4 and once again give access to the dark squares and weaken the dark squares even more. And white is really tied down. What can white play here? The knight cannot move. Then there's immediately queen a1. So the best is play rook to d2 and now b4, d4, b takes c3, king takes c3, c takes d4. This is the best variation white can play, but he still has lost a pawn. He still has a weak king and he still lost. So Black should take home the full point here. Carlsen played queen g7. Knight h2, good move by Caruana, and this was the 40th move. And the quick moment, the 40th move, that means with this move, after this move, Carlsen would get another 50 minutes. Caruana had already played his 40th move with knight h2, he already got the extra time, and Carlsen made a big mistake. He took the pawn on c3. What I would mainly criticize here, it's also a practical mistake, because here he could have repeated moves with queen to g1. And then if white plays knight f1, which he has to, because if knight g4, queen a1 wins on the spot, knight takes e5, rook g1 will be checkmate very soon. Then after knight f1, Carlsen could take all the time he wanted, well, not all the time, but a lot of time. He would get another 50 minutes, and then he could still think about queen g7, or he could maybe realize that there is something stronger, such as b5. b5 is only one of several moves, but it is the most convincing, and I'm sure with more time on the clock, Carlsen could have found this move. So Carlsen chose bishop takes c3, and now white is back in the game. In fact, the black advantage is completely gone. The position is very close to equal again. White takes on f4, now bishop d4, and now Caruana judged correctly that he can go into this endgame and he has enough counterplay. It now gets very concrete. Black goes for the pawn on h3 and white is creating counterplay with his e. The rook has to come back to stop the e-pawn. The pawn goes all the way forward. Knight comes to f5, threatens knight to d6, bishop f6 to stop knight d6. Then black could take on e7 and now a3. So what will happen here, these two pawns will be exchanged and then we'll have a rook endgame. So both players are preparing for that, and that's what we're seeing right here. Try to get the best conditions for it. Takes, takes, bishop takes e7, knight takes. Now we see this rook endgame happening. And after rook h6, king b6, king c3, what can we say about this rook endgame? Black is up a pawn, but all the pawns are on one side and this is a draw. But of course that wouldn't stop black from trying, and certainly Carlsen was also frustrated at this moment because he definitely knew that his position was completely winning and he had blown it before, so he kept on trying. And why wouldn't he? He's not risking anything after all. Now in the next few moves is that Black's provoking white to play d4. This happens in a moment when the rook comes to a8. Now black wants to go a5. This would be still a draw, but black could try some more. So white goes d4. So after a4, a5, white could take and play d5. That would be a draw. And after d4, rook to d8, rook h6, rook d7. Now, once again, Carlsen is trying to improve his position, brings the rook to a3 to have this idea with a5. Here, Carlsen played a6. The problem is that after king b7, rook h8, a5, pawn takes, rook takes, white can immediately force a draw here with d5. And if black takes, there's king to b4, and the pawn will be lost, and it's a draw, because black cannot protect the rook because of rook h6. And if black goes c5, then there are checks. The king has nowhere to go. The rooks and the pawns are stopping the king from escaping via the fifth rank, and if the king goes back, then white can push the pawn, and this would be a draw because the white pieces are too active. So instead, Carlsen chose a6, and Caruana played rook to h8. Now Carlsen played rook a3 check, king b2, rook to g3. And once again, we had a lot of maneuvering when Carlsen tried to make progress here, but Caruana was attentive, and really there was no good way for black to make any progress. There was no way to get this a5 break in under good circumstances. So we see a lot of moving back and forth here, and this is a good technique to tire out your opponent and to hope still to get a chance later on. So let's see what happens. Rook to g6. Here comes the rook again. Check. And rook a7. White is stopping any a5 idea. Now the king comes forward. This looks promising at first, but king b2 just in time. And the rook has to keep defending the pawn. So the rook has to go to a4, I was going to say, but then the rook would be also stuck on a4. So Carlsen tried rook to d3, but now we have a trade of pawns, and here the king is tied to the defense of the pawn, and black cannot make any progress anymore. So Carlsen just tried for a few more moves, but there was no progress to be made. And in this position, finally, Caruana offered a draw, which was accepted because there is no way that black can try more. What an epic first game in this World Championship 2018. Incredible game, and what a missed opportunity for Magnus Carlsen, who had several winning chances, a completely winning position, and what a great escape, of course, by Fabiano Caruana. He defended well under pressure. He did what he could, posed problems, and then defended after time control perfectly to reach his endgame, and then did what he could to hold the draw. What a start to this World Championship 2018. And it shows both players are ambitious, both players are out for a fight, and Carlsen already putting on pressure with the black piece in the first game. But on the other hand, psychological win definitely for Caruana, who showed his tenacity and showed that he could defend. Tomorrow is the next game, and who knows, it might be just as exciting or even more so. Well, it's kind of difficult to top, but who knows. Definitely make sure to tune in. My analysis will be out again on my channel, so make sure to subscribe if you are not yet, and let me know if you have any questions about the game. It was a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to the next games. See you then. Bye bye.